Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening. Hope you're making today your masterpiece. In today's show, we're going to talk about cranberries. The cranberry, the fruit, and how they might improve your memory and protect your brain. We're going to talk about the worst type of milk for your brain. Talk about the benefits of sitting 1 hour or less each day, how exercise helps your brain, and then we're going to talk about something that I get a lot of questions, or at least I have as an orthopedic surgeon, whether compression garments actually improve muscle recovery after sports and exercise, and whether pre-workout supplements, the drinks and various concoctions people make, whether they actually improve your workout. I'm Dr. David Geier, double board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I hope you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injury, or medical history. I apologize for the sunlight coming directly into the sun behind me. I got the shades closed, but it looks like I've got a halo, I don't know where you can see it, behind me, which is really weird. You don't usually get that this time of day, but so I apologize for that. Also, as always, please know that in this show, I'm not giving you medical advice. Any of the topics, the studies we're going to talk about, I'm not giving you medical advice. It's meant for general information and educational purposes only. If you have comments or questions about any of the studies we talk about, leave those over there in the chat. I'd love for you to give your first name and where you are. Jamie says, I appreciate that. I guess it's not that bad, but I'd love to know where you are along with your comment or questions. So a lot to get to today. We're going to do a little bit about exercise, quite a bit about the brain, and then we will be here Thursday as well for Better Than Ever Live. Make sure you join us on Thursday. I apologize for missing Tuesday, Thursday last week, but I'm excited to be back. And then if you have orthopedic injury questions, bring those Friday at noon to Ask Dr. Geier Live. All right, let's start with cranberries. Something I was just thinking about as I was reading this study. I don't think I've ever, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think I've ever actually had cranberries as a fruit. I've only had cranberry juice, and to be fair, I suspect that was mostly sugar and not just 100% cranberries and water. So I'm not 100% sure just as a fruit how much I would like it, but there was an interesting study that looked at memory and whether or not they may actually fight off dementia. Now, this new study, unfortunately, and you've heard me talk about this, it was published in a reputable nutrition journal, Frontiers in Medicine, but it was paid for, or at least supported by, a grant from the Cranberry Institute. And you've heard me say multiple times, a lot of these nutrition studies are funded by the Beef Council or, a food company or, any of these different nutritional organizations that have sort of a vested interest to promote a particular fruit, vegetable, meat, whatever it is. And so it does make me think a little bit, like I'd love to see this done by people that aren't funded by the Cranberry Institute. But anyway, what these researchers did is that they looked at people 50 to 80 years old that ate 1 cup of cranberries a day, and they did that for 12 weeks. They were all healthy, 50 to 80 years old. Now, half of them took, and they didn't eat it just as cranberries like I told you. What the researchers did is they gave the cranberries to half of those 60 people as a freeze-dried cranberry powder. The other group just got a placebo. And I suspect that was as much as anything so that you didn't know which group you're in, because cranberries, people generally know what cranberries taste like from the cranberry juice, and that would be hard to make a placebo. But I like this better than those epidemiology studies where they follow people for 30 years and look at everything they ate, and the group that ate cranberries ended up doing better. I mean, sometimes that's all you can do, but I actually like this better. It's just, I don't know, cranberry powder versus actually eating the cranberries. But having said that, what they figured out is that the people who ate cranberries they had significantly better episodic memory, visual episodic memory, their memories of specific events and being able to see it. They had better neural functioning. They had better blood flow in their brain. And the thought is, with more blood flow over many, many years, eating an ounce of cranberries every day, or however you choose to do it, several times a week, I would think that might help you fight off dementia. Now, they would need to follow these people longer to potentially see, does this decrease Parkinson's dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, those types of things. But it's potentially interesting. I don't know, none of my friends, and I have a lot of friends that eat a lot of fruit, I don't know anybody that talks about eating a lot of cranberries. Those of you that know more nutrition than me, we talk about berries being low glycemic fruits as far as fruits go. Blueberries, strawberries, blackberries especially. I actually don't know if cranberries are in that group or not. That would be interesting to know. So, Jamie, I've got some thoughts. I will, maybe I'll try to address that at the end of the show. She asked about diverticulitis and things related to that. Let's talk about something that would bother people with diverticulitis, or at least a lot of them, I would think, and that is milk. And we're going to talk about the type of milk that actually could make your brain age the fastest. According to this study, there's one particular type of milk that is particularly bad. I literally earlier today was driving home from the gym and was listening to a podcast with David Sinclair, wrote the book Lifespan. You've heard me talk about it. And he has an 8-episode podcast that I just started. And in the second episode, he's talking about the one type of food. He talks about what to eat and when to eat, but he mentions the one type of food he tells people, if you're going to stop one thing, what would you give up? And he says sugar, and love that. That would be the second thing I tell people to give up because it is got so many issues. But the first one I would give up would be processed carbs. Things that come in bags, things that come in boxes, things that come in cans, or not just processed carbs, just processed foods and processed and ultra refined foods. So bags, frozen food containers, cans, boxes, things like that that have been ultra processed. And yes, you're going to get rid of a lot of sugar by giving those up, but it's going to cut your salt, and it's a very quick, easy thing to radically overhaul your diet. You're actually then going to be cooking real foods. Meats, fishes, fruits, vegetables, those kinds of things, I would argue much, much better. My second thing, again, would be sugar. Then I would say probably gluten after that. And then the last one, the fourth one, would be dairy, potentially. Dairy's not bad for everybody, but there's a lot of reasons potentially to give it up. But again, that's kind of where I would start. But specifically with dairy, there's one type that might be worse than the others. This study was in the journal Molecular Nutrition and Food Research. Almost 5,000 people were in this study between the ages of 55 and 75. And they gave all sorts of information about what they ate. And then the researchers put them through these neuropsychological tests at baseline, followed them for 2 years, repeated those tests, those neurocognitive tests. And what they found out was there was an association and a higher rate of cognitive decline among the people who drank whole fat milk. Now, what they can't tell you from that study, and they also found they had a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. That part is probably not that surprising. That's been studied in the past before, hence the suggestions that some doctors give to go skim milk if you're going to do dairy. But here's what this doesn't say. Those types of studies, it's not saying that the whole milk is causing the cognitive decline, the decreased scores on these cognitive tests 2 years later. It's just correlated. Now, it could be the cause, but it could also be that people ate whole fat milk, also ate other types of foods that were potentially bad. Maybe people ate whole fat milk were less sedentary. Maybe it could be any number of things, but it is kind of an interesting thing. I'm not so, anti-dairy that I tell people everybody's got to give it up, but my friends that I have and colleagues that I know that are very, very into exactly what they eat and biohacking and all that, I don't know any of them that regularly drink or eat dairy. I mean, they do occasional cheese, something, but it just on a day-to-day basis, most of them don't eat dairy. I feel like if you're trying to lose weight, it might be a good place, one area to focus on. All right, let's talk about sitting. And I thought about this because I'm studying for my anti-aging and regenerative medicine boards. I take the first test of that, the written exam on Saturday. So I bet I sat, 7, 8 hours, 9 hours earlier today studying and doing some other work. And I know a lot of people, and I sit more than I'd like, but a lot of people that work desk jobs, working at a computer and by a phone, that literally sit all the time. Even people that are really active, that go home and exercise or exercise before work, still sit 7, 8, 9 hours a day. And we know that's not good for you. There have been multiple people that have compared sitting to smoking, saying sitting is the new smoking. And so everybody's like, hey, you got to find ways to walk more, get a standing desk or get a treadmill desk, or, there's lots of things. Instead of emailing people, walk over to that side of the office and talk to them, those types of things, have walking meetings. But how much sitting do you actually need to cut out to see health benefits? And what this study found out is that if you did this for 3 months, if all you did was just sit for an hour less every day or move around more for just 1 hour a day, you sit 8 hours of work, maybe you only sit 7, or combining work and home, you cut it by just 1 hour. Significant improvements in cardiovascular health, significant improvements in type 2 diabetes risk, which is going higher and higher and higher in this country. It gets even better if you pair it with more exercise. And this was a study done in Finland, middle-aged adults, but it applies to basically just everybody, every age group. This can make a big deal. They looked at activity and sedentary time using accelerometers, followed them for 3 months. They tracked body composition, blood pressure, body composition meaning lean muscle mass, body fat, things like that, blood glucose levels, and a specific enzyme in the liver that sort of determines cardiometabolic health, cardiovascular health. The group that sat even just 1 hour less, significantly better blood sugar levels, insulin levels, and overall little health. The biggest results, again, if you exercise, that made it that much better. But the people that sat the most, taking 1 hour away, even bigger differences than, let's just say you only sit 2 hours a day and you dropped it to 1. So if you really have a work job where you're sitting a lot, very, very important to just find a way 1 hour or less of sitting. And again, I talked about some of the ideas. If you're in a busy office, instead of emailing back and forth, just walk over there. Anytime you're on the phone, stand up and walk around, assuming you can do that on a cell phone. Walk up and down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Just having meetings by walking around, going outside for your lunch break and just walking around. There's a lot of ways to do it. Park at the very far back part of the parking lot instead of driving around trying to get the closest spot. There's lots of little things you can do that add up, and that can make a huge difference in your just overall health and longevity. All right. We talked about this study in a different way, not this study, but this idea in a different way about 3-4 weeks ago, how exercise helps you learn. And for students, that could be really good. Maybe before you study, go out for a run. Maybe before a test, you go for a run. Well, there was a study that looked at older adults. This was done at UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego. And what they found is exercise improved brain function, cognitive tasks, executive function in older people. and older, I hesitate because it starts at age 50 in this study. People between 50 and 74 years old, they wore accelerometers while they worked out, and then they did several cognitive tests from home, these brain function tests. And there was a very, very clear correlation between exercise and cognition. Basically, on the days people exercised, cognitive scores were higher. On the days that the same people didn't exercise, their performance decreased. So, I could, if you're retired, you're not doing anything, all you're doing is playing golf or something, maybe you don't need cognitive function. No. Everybody needs to exercise because everybody needs good cognitive function. And I think what would be really interesting if this, and maybe they will, if these UCSD researchers, if they kept following that group of people 2 years later, 5 years later, and did brain tests, it'd be interesting to see if there's a big difference in accumulation of proteins that leads to things like Alzheimer's or things like Parkinson's. Just overall, is there a decline in brain volume? Is there a decline in executive function and speed of response and all of that? I would expect that you might see some differences. So exercise, if you're a student, if you have kids that take tests and learn a lot of material, have them exercise after school, maybe before they start studying, or play sports and then start studying. If you are at work and you want to function, have a clear brain and function really well at work, finding ways to get that exercise, very, very important. Richard, I was telling the people at the beginning, and he's from Portugal, very, very excited. My brother went to Portugal for his honeymoon years ago. I don't do orthopedic questions on this show, but on Fridays, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, that's all I do for Ask Dr. Geier Live. So join us then, and I am more than happy to talk about clavicle fractures. All right, so I used to do this radio show every Wednesday. I did it for maybe 12 years, a local radio show here, huge audience, and multiple times the host, it was just questions about injuries of famous athletes, pro athletes, college athletes, things like that. And we talked about, he would ask me about various things and, unrelated to injuries, but sports related. And multiple times he asked me about these sleeves and tights and these compression garments, compression gear that the athletes wore. And what was the point? Did they actually do anything? So there was a study published in the journal Sports Medicine just recently that it was a meta-analysis, so it's basically as good as the studies that went into it. But they looked at these compression garments, and what they were trying to figure out is, and these are things, they wear them on their arms or on their legs. If you watch the NBA, they all wear them on their legs, it seems like, and sometimes it'll just be one leg, which looks kind of funny, or it'll just be one arm, but they do it. And the thought is that maybe, all right, they enhance muscle recovery following really aggressive exercise, following really aggressive sports. And I won't get into the details of all the different studies, but basically what they found out, wearing these compression garments during the training, wearing them after training does not facilitate muscle recovery. Doesn't matter what type of exercise, doesn't matter what body part, doesn't matter when it was applied. During exercise, after exercise, seem to make no difference. Now, here's what I would say about that, because I've treated a lot of athletes over the years, and a lot of pro athletes even, and sometimes this comes up, and sometimes people feel like they do better in it. Yeah, maybe if you do markers of, lactate and creatinine and creatine kinase in the blood, you don't see any real differences, compression garment or not. That's fine, but there is something to be said with perceived recovery. And if you feel better doing it, have at it. So I always, with something like this, tell people, try it and see how you like it. The studies may not show that much, but if you benefit from it, by all means. But if you don't really care either way, you can't really tell a difference. Sometimes people say these are hot or they're uncomfortable. then yeah, it probably doesn't make a huge difference. There are a lot of these that are, especially the really tight ones that are marketed as a recovery treatment. You wear them afterwards. I actually tried one of those for a while. I absolutely hated it. It was basically a long sleeve, really tight nylon t-shirt, and there was tights that went with it. I hated it, and I didn't feel like it was any better. If anything, I felt like it was worse. My personal experience. But that is the study as it's posted in Sports Medicine. All right, and the last one I want to talk about, pre-workout supplements. So I work out at a powerlifting gym here in Charleston, and it's a lot of really big men and women, and now this summer it's a lot of high school kids and college kids, still really big kids, and they are all, not all, but a whole lot of them are drinking pre-workout. And that is, there's a number of them out there. Multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements is the name, but people call them pre-workouts. And people do them to perform better, whether it's physically or mentally. Now, the primary ingredient in most of these is caffeine. And so the question is caffeine what's giving any kind of benefit if there is one? But some of them have tyrosine, some of them have theanine, which I like not for pre-workouts, but theanine, good for mental clarity and performance, and it balances caffeine. There's citrulline. I actually have that as a pre-workout. I don't like it all that much. That plus beta alanine makes gives me like, not a rash, but it's like a tingling sensation, like a flushing. I don't particularly like it, but some people like it. There's alpha GPC, glycerophosphocholine, also one of the ingredients in these multi-ingredient performance supplements. And what these authors did, what they wanted to find in this study was, do these pre-workout supplements improve mental performance? Do they improve physical performance? And what they found is, this is kind of interesting. Yes, they do help, but only in certain ways. They improved attention, basically improved mean reaction times. They improved perceived fatigue, basically your perception of feeling tired, which I think is really important, and vigor, the perception of feeling energetic. So that is really good. It's almost as a psychological sense. What they did not find, or what they found in the bad sense, no effect on actual physical improvements. And what they tested was vertical jump performance. Now, what the problem with this study is that, again, a lot of these different supplements have different things, and what caffeine is a common ingredient. So is caffeine what's changing their reaction times, their perceived exertion, their perceived vigor, their energy, that kind of thing? Because caffeine would do that. And the problem with caffeine in pre-workouts is that if you work out in the afternoon or evening, and next week we're going to talk about the best time of exercise. It's different for men and women, actually. A study that just came out, I want to say today or yesterday, I just read it, and I'm going to talk about it next week. But if you work out at night, and I did this for years, you probably don't want to be having caffeine at 6, 7 o'clock at night, because it's going to be really hard to sleep. So then you might not be able to use a pre-workout that has caffeine. But again, some of the other ingredients, the citrulline, the theanine, the alpha GPC, maybe that wouldn't have some of that effect. Now, is it the caffeine? Is it the combination? That's what we don't really know. This is another one that I would say, hey, try it for yourself and see how it goes. There was one I tried for years. No, not years. Yeah, probably a couple years. It came out, Tim Ferriss, it was his company. Those of you that know the 4-Hour Work Week, 4-Hour Body, 4-Hour Chef, Tools of Titans, all those books. He's fantastic. And I think it was 4-Hour Body, he talks about using, it was called Body Quick, but it was also if you remember the story from 4-Hour Work Week, it was marketed as Brain Quicken as well. But he talks about it in 4-Hour Body, even though he had sold the company at that point, but using it as basically a pre-workout pill. And the problem was, and it was very transparent on the bottle, on the nutritional label, it had a lot of caffeine in it. Now, as a pre-workout, it worked great, and I actually didn't mind it back then because I was working out a lot earlier. But then things changed, and I started working out late afternoon and evening, and I had to stop that because I wasn't able to sleep. So make sure, depending on what time you exercise, decide if pre-workout with caffeine is good for you. The other thing that I see at my powerlifting gym, sort of the the moderated pre-workout. I don't know that this is such a great thing, but it would have similar benefits. A lot of those guys drink energy drinks. Like I said, I was there not too long ago, and a guy was doing chest and shoulders, and he had this, it wasn't Monster, it was a different brand, but it was a Monster-sized energy drink. And I was just I was thinking, man, if that was me, I would not be able to sleep tonight. So let me know what you think about any of that. If you have any comments about any of those questions. As far as what's good for endurance sports, that's a little tricky as far as pre-workout. I would worry about anything with caffeine in an endurance sport from a dehydration sense. I think from an endurance sport, you want fluids before you go for a long run or whatever, cycling, whatever it is. You would want carbs, and you would maintain both fluid and carbs during a really long endurance. A little bit of protein. The mistake I see in endurance athletes, especially doing this sort of, hey, I'm going to do this right before a race, right before a competition. You've got to eat foods that are familiar to your body and that your body can tolerate well. Something unfamiliar, something really heavy, that 30 minutes in may not go so well, so for a lot of reasons. So I always tell people, hey, try different things, but get to where this is something you do normally. But a little bit of protein, adequate carbs, because you're going to burn a lot of carbs, and then adequate fluid. Electrolytes, maybe. Most people, it depends. Now, if you're endurance, you're probably losing enough sweat that you're going to lose electrolytes. Most people that are drinking, and I say this just as a brand name, this is not a criticism of Gatorade, but Gatorades, Powerades, those kind of things. I see all these kids drinking it, and then they train for 30 minutes, and that's true with adults, and you're negating any of the benefits, all the calories you burn by just taking in all that sugar, and you didn't need any of those electrolytes anyway. You typically need to go, some people say 45 minutes, but it's probably 60. I've heard as much as 90 minutes before you really need to replace electrolytes. So for what that's worth. All right. I did tell Jamie that I would talk a little bit about diverticulitis, and I will go on. I will say, as those of you all know, I'm not a gastroenterologist. I'm not a GI specialist, but I know a lot about this as much as anything because I've been researching it in terms of ways to help people with arthritis. And one of the challenges in arthritis is inflammation throughout the body. And most of the inflammation, or at least a big cause of the inflammation, is from your gut microbiome and inflammatory mediators that basically come through your GI system, increased intestinal permeability, and diverticulitis is in that group. I can't speak as for specific treatments for that, but I am a big fan for prebiotics and probiotics for really just about anybody active, but I feel like they could especially be helpful for people with ulcerative colitis, diverticular disease, celiac, things like that. There are ways to do that quickly in terms of fecal transplants, and we've talked about that a little bit in the past, but that's a whole other discussion. But prebiotics, inulin, fructooligosaccharides, there's a number of different ones. I take a supplement. This is not an endorsement. I'm not sponsored by them, but I love it. Athletic Greens, which has inulin. I feel like that is very good as a prebiotic. Probiotics, you could either eat fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, some yogurts, or you could take it as a supplement, and there's different ones you can take. I am a big fan. Now, those are both good, but you also have to change the diet. So you get rid of the processed foods, dairy, anything that you're potentially allergic to. Gluten would be a common one. And then maybe focus on more of a plant-based diet, but certainly a more healthy diet. Again, not a GI person, but that's kind of where I would start with that. And Richard, like I said, definitely join us Friday. He does trail running and biking, which, definitely endurance events. Love that. If you want to see me formally as a patient, whether it's orthopedic problems, and literally I got like 2 or 3 people that reached out to me from all over the country today. So definitely I'm excited to do that. I can't really do virtual discussions or virtual care outside of North and South Carolina because I don't have licenses in those states. And a lot of people want to talk to me about peptides or penicillin or exosomes or, a lot of the sort of non-traditional treatments. I would love to see you in our Charleston, South Carolina office. In the description below is a link to my website, drdavidgeier.com. You can go to the Work With Me tab. It drops down. You'll see a contact page. Fill that out, and it gets to me and my assistant, and we could potentially talk to you about either seeing you here in Charleston or potentially other ways to potentially work together. Also, if you like things like this, if you're just catching this on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, make sure to subscribe. Let me give you all the different links. All Dr. David Geier, everywhere, DrDavidGeier. Click the bell to be notified when I'm online. This show, I talk health, wellness, exercise, sleep, aging, mental health, exercise, all sorts of good stuff to help you live long, to feel and perform your best. And tell your friends that we're here just about every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, Better Than Ever Live, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, the Better Than Ever Daily podcast, a daily tip Monday through Friday that are less than a minute long. You can listen to 15 or 20 of them on your way to work. Or when you're at work, go for a walk for 15 or 20 minutes so you don't sit as much. Listen to Better Than Ever Daily. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you Thursday afternoon, 5 p.m. Eastern, for our next Better Than Ever Live. Take care.